Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. Vivek Ramaswamy is campaigning to be president. He's making his rounds and he's saying a whole lot. But he's also telling us who he is. I suggest we believe him. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy is a very impressive young man. I say that because at the age of 37, he has amassed a fortune of $630 million, mostly from his biotech and financial businesses. He's patented some 4 drugs, one of which treats Alzheimer's. He's a graduate of Yale and Harvard. And that's just a tip of the accomplishments of this young man. I think he was valedictorian of his college. He's an extremely smart, extremely intelligent man. But now he's running for president. And he's running as an Indian American Republican conservative. Now, I mention all those labels for a reason, and it is germane to this conversation. I caught wind of him when he made an appearance on the Breakfast Club, which was a disastrous interview from the Breakfast Club side. They totally botched that interview. But I have to give him props, Vivek, for daring to go where most Republicans won't go. As I said, he's making his rounds. Here he is at a South Chicago barbershop. And again, I give him props for going there, talking to this crowd of people that, for the most part, won't vote for him. However, he did impress a lot of this crowd. He did impress black conservatives, which is to be expected. But with all that he is saying and all this gravitas, his charismatic nature, and he, in my opinion, is running a very smart, strategic campaign. It's just one thing. I think there's 2 reasons why he won't make the president. 1, his religion. 2, the color of his skin. I just don't believe that white conservatives will vote for him. Okay? Now, we'll see. But more than that, in his campaign rounds, what he is revealing about his ideology is troubling. What he has to say, what he thinks about America, what he thinks about life is troubling. And that's why I said he is telling us who he is and we should believe him. So let me give you an example. Let's go to the first clip here.
Issue. This is also something that your opponents, Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, have called for, including DeSantis very recently, which is an end to birthright citizenship. What's your position on that? Would you end birthright citizenship?
Now, to be clear, birthright citizenship is the right of anyone who is born on American soil. They are entitled to citizenship. They are entitled to full rights for just being born on this land. Let's see how he responds to this.
I think for a period of time, I think it's going to be necessary in this country because we have an influx of migrants across that southern border, 14,000 plus per day by some estimates crossing.
Now I want to stop here, and I realize I'm going to be stopping probably more frequent than I probably was more desired, but I want to address certain points as we go. First is that when he talks about 14,000 immigrants or migrants crossing the border, Now, he's saying that they're crossing the border illegally. But what he's not telling you is that they are also being stopped. In other words, it's not 14,000 migrants flooding the nation. Unless if you want to talk about what the governor of Texas and the governor of Florida did by taking some undocumented immigrants and then flying them to other cities further into the interior of the United States. Wasn't that legal? Because were they documented when they transported them? But I digress. There's another point too, is that many of the undocumented immigrants that do cross the border do so because businesses are hiring them. You know, farmers, maids, construction people. Okay, and usually nothing is done to these big businesses, these big corporations who hire undocumented immigrants. So he's not talking about that. He's demonizing, and notice he's lumping all 14,000 as illegal. Another thing he's going to mischaracterize is the reason why they do cross the border. In other words, he's going to say they're crossing the border to be criminals. No, they're crossing the borders searching for a better life. Understand that many of them flee horrendous circumstances and living conditions from their former nations, the nation that they're fleeing from. Usually dictatorships, again, poverty, and we can go on. So his characterization here, the framing of how he wants to group an entire a group of people is troubling. But let's listen to him.
That southern border, that is not the rule of law. That is the abandonment of the rule of law. So if migrants are coming illegally, intentionally, to be able to establish an illegal toehold in the United States, then I think that that's something that we should not abide in this country.
And we
To
should
the
say
contrary,
that
I take
you
that
were,
issue one step even.
we should say also, I mean, both of your parents are immigrants to the United States, so you would have been a beneficiary of birthright citizenship, but you now are saying you would ban that for people coming into the country. And what is the period of time for which that would be the case?
I would correct her on one thing. He is a beneficiary of birthright citizenship. His parents were immigrants, and he benefits from being born on this soil. So much so that he's able to run for the presidency of the United States. Unlike, let's say, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was the governor of California, and he wanted to run for president, but because he wasn't born on this soil, it is impossible for him to make a run for the presidency. Unless you change the Constitution, which he is going to suggest or express that he wants to change the Constitution. Let's listen.
People coming into the country illegally. That's the key distinction. And people make this mistake all the time. And I think you got to be really careful when you talk about the difference between legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. One is founded on following the rule of law. The other is founded on breaking the rule of law.
That might be the case, but I'm just saying that
border
birthright
security and immigration are not the same issue.
What I'm saying is that birthright citizenship, as it is currently in law, does not make that distinction between whether that person was born to someone legally or not. So you are.
Now, this right here, she nails him on this. I think she exposes his hypocrisy. Which he, by the way, he knows this, that the law does not make a distinction. If you're born on this soil, you are an American citizen, and you are entitled to all of the rights and privileges of an American citizen. But his views gets worse. Listen.
Saying that even though birthright citizenship for you was something that was in play, you would take it off the table now. And my question is also, how long would that be the case? And also, how would you do it? Would you go to Congress for a constitutional amendment?
Now, I want you to hear that last question that she asked. Would you go to Congress? Meaning, in order for it to change birthright citizenship, you have to change the Constitution. He's expressing he wants to change the Constitution. He wants to fundamentally change the very articles, the principles in which this nation was founded upon. Now, this is kind of different now, because if you stop and think about what he is proposing, you go back to 1776, when the Constitution was drafted. You know, that statement that we hold these truths as self-evident, that all men are created equal and are entitled to inalienable rights granted by the Creator. Paraphrase. He wants to change that. But also think about this, that in 1776, when the Constitution was drafted, who were the citizens then? In other words, who became citizens? Who became natural citizens? Well, it was those who were born on this soil at that time, except for slaves. Now keep this in mind, that the slaves that were born of all ages at the same time as the founding fathers were denied citizenship based upon their birth. Now, they did it not changing the Constitution, but just flagrantly disregarding the Constitution when it came to slaves. He is talking about changing the Constitution. That's dangerous.
Well, actually, I've supported the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. I'll actually go one step further on this, Abby, is that I don't think someone, just because they're born in this country, even if they're a sixth-generation American, should automatically enjoy all the privileges of citizenship until they've actually earned it. So one of the things I've said is that
Now, did you hear what he just said? When he says, I'm going to go a step further, this is a dangerous step further. That now, not only would he take away birthright citizenships, but now you can't even be a citizen. Even if you're born here, you have to meet a criteria. That's why I played that clip from the Starship Troopers, where all of a sudden you had to earn citizenship. This is a dangerous mindset that he has here.
Every high school student who graduates from high school should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a citizen of this country. I believe that there are civic duties attached to citizenship, so much so that I don't think you should automatically get your right to vote at age 18 unless you have passed that same citizenship test that immigrants have had to pass,
right,
or else have served the country.
Understood.
This is part of my broader pro-civic vision.
I understand that, although I think there are some questions about why younger Americans would have less citizenship rights than older Americans, but I do want to move on here.
Now, she just, again, made the statement right there that there are different classes of people then. For example, if you're 6 years old, according to Vivek, you don't have rights. You don't have citizenship. But it goes even deeper than that. If you're 18 and haven't passed the test, you don't have citizenship. You don't have rights. What about if you're illiterate? Then possibly you could never have citizenship or rights. That's a dangerous mindset. In other words, to me, that kind of mindset would be worse than those who just kind of ignored the Constitution during slavery. He wants to change it to where it wouldn't even exist in the Constitution. That's a dangerous precedent. Let's go to the next clip. Now, this clip here was taken, and one of the things we're going to see about Vivek is that he conforms to whatever audience he is addressing. This is the National Association, National Rifle Association. So I want you to notice how he talks. But again, listen to what he expresses, what the mindset. But notice how he's talking when he's with this crowd. Now, one thing, I didn't play the audio of the interaction when he was at the Black the black barber shop on the south side of Chicago. But just imagine, do you think he would say any of these things at that barber shop, right? He didn't say it on the Breakfast Club either. But here we go.
I want you to raise your hand if you know when the first anti-gun laws were passed in this country. Raise your hand if you do. 1865. You want to know when it happened? We fought a civil war in this country to give black Americans the equal protection under the law that we failed to secure them in 1776. But then you want to know what happened? Southern states passed anti-gun laws that stopped black people from owning guns. The Democrat Party then, as in now, wanted to put them back in chains.
Now, part of the problem with this statement that he made here was how he conflates certain issues, right? So the first thing he said was, and you're going to see again the dance that he does, shrewd, crafty. But I want you to understand what he said. He said that the Civil War was fought to give black people gun ownership. Now that's a slight truth, because in a sense, well, yeah, the Civil War was fought to give black people constitutional rights. But it wasn't fought so that they can have gun rights. It was fought that they can have all constitutional rights. So in that respect, okay, yeah, he's right, but he's certainly missing words. And catering to the crowd here, he then kind of mischaracterizes what really the Civil War was fought over. It was to end slavery, not so that, hey, black people, you can have guns. Because even to this day, it is a bitter pill for black people to have guns. If you go back to the Black Panther, when they stood in front of the Berkeley, I believe it's Berkeley, California City Hall, or one of the courthouses, strapped with rifles, Ronald Reagan then lost his mind. They actually changed laws. So again, an untruth of what he is saying. But let's go on, because now they're going to kind of question him about that clip. About those statements. But I want you to remember the statement itself, because he's going to dance around with it, and he's going to, as a shrewd politician, dodge even what he said. And remember, what he said was that the Civil War was fought to give black people Second Amendment rights, or to carry guns.
Then, as in now, that's quite an accusation about the current Democratic Party. Who and what were you referring to?
I was referring to Joe Biden and his expression of wanting to put them back in chains, dating back to Lyndon Johnson. I think Lyndon Johnson's so-called Great Society was one of the greatest misnomers in American political history, where even back then in the 1960s, 70% plus of black kids were born into two-parent homes. Today, that number is less than 30% in the opposite direction. The very policies that we implemented in this country in the name of helping black Americans have actually been disastrous for black Americans and all Americans. And I think that's...
Now, there's a couple of things now. I want you to notice what he said at the end. He says that the policies of Joe Biden and the Democrats hurt, they were meant to help black Americans, but then he threw it in this little tidbit, in all Americans. Now, why do you suppose he said that? Because, see, the reality is that the policies of Lyndon Johnson were not designed exclusively to help African Americans. They were designed to help all Americans. And one of the problems is that you don't include all Americans when you paint them as evil, or you paint the policies as evil. Because who benefit mostly from the policies of Lyndon Johnson? We also got to understand is that this characterization that when you label black Americans as a whole, well, that all black Americans even need the policies of Lyndon Johnson. And we kind of go back. That's what I mean. You go back to certain cities. You know, those cities where black people did pull themselves up by the bootstraps, like Tulsa and Rosewood. You had different levels of different classes, right? You had poor, you had criminals, you had illiterate, but you also had what? Working class, blue collar. You had professionals, educated, college degrees. You had business owners, lawyers, doctors. And so to classify all blacks in that category as the beneficiaries of Lyndon Johnson's welfare programs, and that's what we do all the time. But what happened to those towns? Well, white Americas, right? And let's go back to the 20s, that white Americas, through jealousy and hatred, right, destroyed those towns. But what happened when those towns got destroyed? The insurance companies would not pay. The government did not come and give relief funds. So what happened to the people? Now let's fast forward. At the same time that Lyndon Johnson was enacting his policies, and remember, as he said, that, well, they were designed to help black people. They wasn't designed to help black people. They were designed to help disenfranchised people or poor people. Black people were a part of that. But it was a segment of the black people that was a part of that. It was a segment of the black people that was on welfare. Let's talk about why they were on welfare. Remember, at the very time that Lyndon Johnson enacted his policies, Jim Crow was very much so active, right? The policies, the laws of Jim Crow existed. African Americans lived under the brutal, tyrannical conditions of Jim Crow, which means they could not get loans. They could not, they had to conduct themselves a certain way. If not, they would get brutalized by the police, the mobs. We're talking about family mobs. Just Google lynching and see what comes up. You'll see pictures of entire towns coming out to lynch a black person. Many times they were falsely accused. There was no legal recourse. So when you talk about the poor then of the black people, how were they to live had it not been for those policies that Lyndon Johnson put in place? But not all black people needed those benefits. There was always, Martin Luther King himself came from an upper middle class neighborhood. He was an extremely educated person. I think he went into college maybe at the age of 15 to 16. Okay. His father was educated. So there was always class difference within the black Americans. And what people like Vivek is doing is saying black America as if that's the whole. And that is the problem of his argument here. But let's go on to the next clip.
And I think that that's something that we need to wake up to.
In 1865, you were talking about the black codes, right?
That's right.
Passed, enacted to make it a crime for a black person to carry a gun in the South. But you're equating that to the current president?
Let's be clear that the black codes that they're referring to were enacted during slavery. In other words, it was to keep slaves from having guns. Also, slaves could not learn how to read or write. That especially came with uprisings like the Nat Turner uprisings, but this was during slavery. Now, after the Civil War, there were laws that kept black people from achieving any level of society. Okay, so here we go.
Referring to economic change? What are you saying?
Well, I was referring to Joe Biden's, I think, ill-chosen expression to say they're the party that wants to put you back into chains. What I'm actually saying is that if you look at the policies of the modern Democratic Party,
Democrats.
absolutely. So What I'm saying is that actually it's policies like that of Lyndon Johnson and Joe Biden that are actually holding black
Lyndon
Americans
Johnson's
back.
the war on poverty.
I will question what policy of Joe Biden right now is holding black people back. What policies of Democrats are holding black people back? He cannot cite that. And I already explained about the policies of Lyndon Johnson's, that they were never intended just exclusively for black people, but for all Americans, as he said. Okay.
Poverty?
Yes, and in particular, his Great Society, where he actually created incentives in the family, where if you're a family, you could actually get more money by not having the father in the home. Guess what you get? You get what you pay for. And I think it's been really bad for the black community. I think it's really bad for all Americans.
Do you have anything on this before I...
Okay, so now, again, he said it again. He said it again. And to me, again, first of all, he's pushing the talking points of the Republican Party. Okay. Let me go to the next clip, because again, this kind of gets even worse. Let's see here. Is this the one I want?
Do you have anything on this before I move on to China?
I don't see what one has to do with the other, but go on. I took up a lot of time with Fox.
Oh, it's fine. We have time.
I don't really see what one has to do with the other, especially consider and using the Civil War to talk about black Americans. That war was not fought for black people to have guns. That's not.
That war was fought for black people to have freedoms in this country.
Yeah.
Actually.
Now, that's why I played this clip, because if you notice the bait and switch here, remember what he said. Now, the clip that they played was the clip that I played from the NRA convention was shown on here, and that's why they're asking him this and they're questioning him about this. But but he said that the Civil War was fought, to give black people guns. So he said that. Now he's saying the Civil War was fought to give black people freedoms. But that's not what they're talking about, and that's not what they're arguing about. That's not the topic of discussions. No one is arguing that the civil rights, that the Civil War was fought to give black people their rights. No one is arguing, or freedoms. No one is arguing about that. But this is the tactic which shows me, again, he's not about truth, that he is pushing a conservative narrative. Here we go.
That's why the Civil War was fought.
Okay.
And the sad
but that
part
wasn't
about
fought for black people to have guns. I think.
Actually, you know, funny fact is, black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that's one of the...
Now, that's just an outright lie, first of all. Black people could never enjoy the freedom of having a gun. Even now, when you talk about stand your ground, when a white man can say, I shoot someone and I'm standing my ground, when the very same black person stands his ground, he will at very least go through a lengthy trial, but more likely go to jail.
Lessons
black
that we
people
learned.
still aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. And I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
When you are in black skin and you live in this country, then you can disagree with me. But we're not. You mentioned in here that we have three different shades
Don, I think we have to be able to
here.
talk about these issues in the open, regardless of the color of our skin. Black Americans today, to say that, compare that to 1865 and 1964,
I think for you to compare it to 1865 and
have equal
1964
rights in this country.
actually, I think it's insulting to black people.
Now, I want to criticize Don Lemon for this, because you see a lot of black people will kind of counteract with, you're not black, so you can't relate to what I'm saying. That's just utter nonsense. Now, while I may say that I will never say that I understand what it's like to give birth to a child, because without a doubt, every woman that I could have said that to would immediately counteract, no, you cannot. You can never understand what it's like to give birth to a child. And that is true. What I can say is, watching a woman give birth to a child, I can say, oh man, that's hard. That's some hard stuff you went through. I don't know how it feels, but watching your expressions, I know what it's like. So for Don to say, well, you can't understand what we go through as the black man, so therefore you can't talk to me about it, is a poor argument. That's why he's able to really come back and say, we should be able to talk about this regardless of the color of our skin. We get to the color of the skin later.
What's insulting to me as an African American, I don't want to sit here and argue with you because it's infuriating for you to put those things together. It's not right. Your telling of history is wrong.
Now that's so again, what Don said was true, that his telling of history is wrong, but it's also deliberate. All right, let's go to the next clip.
What part of the history was wrong?
What part of the history was wrong? That the Civil War was fought. You're making people think that the Civil War was fought for black people, only for black people to get guns and for black people to have.
The Civil War was fought for black.
Now, this is true. He's deliberately doing this. He's deliberately misleading the people into thinking something. But then he's careful about choosing his words. This, to me, speaks to the kind of character that he has. He's a shrewd, sly, crafty politician. That's it. Here we go.
And for black people to have.
The Civil War was fought for black people in this country to get freedoms, a noble mission. And I think that even after we succeeded, we had to actually secure those freedoms.
To reduce.
Now, that's true what he's saying, but that's not what he said in the clip. And he knows that. What's disturbing to me about what he is saying is that he's willing to manipulate circumstances, conversations in words. Okay? And again, we already had a president that showed us more and more. Politicians do this all the time. And he is a shrewd politician, a slick-talking politician.
Sit in a speech at the NRA to say you're making people think, or you're trying to say that black people to get guns, that was the reason that you're there at the NRA. That was the reason for the Civil War.
It is a
fact.
That's
reductive.
It's not
and
reductive,
I think it's
Don.
insulting. There are a whole plethora of reasons that for the Civil War.
With due respect, I find your explanation reductive and actually insulting, including to black Americans, to say that black people today, compared to 1964, 1865, haven't made progress in part because of the freedoms we secured. And
typical response, he just absolutely lied. No one ever said, nor was it ever a part of the conversation that, like Don Lemon said, that, well, black people we're still in chains. We haven't made any progress. When people jump to that kind of maneuver, again, they're being disingenuous. And he's being disingenuous by making that statement. No one ever argued that. How about stick to the fact, and I would say this, my criticism again with Don, make him show you the facts. Make him show you, cite where you said that the Civil War was fought to give black people the rights to carry guns. Make him prove that.
Second Amendment was
black
part
people,
of what
hang on,
that
please.
freedom.
I cannot keep a thought if you guys are talking to me in my ear. So hang on one second. So to say that black people, say what you said again.
Black people secured their freedoms after the Civil War. It is a historical fact, Don. Just study it. Only after their Second Amendment rights were secured.
They
That's
were
a
not
fact.
secured their freedoms after the Civil War. That is not, you are discounting Reconstruction. You're discounting a whole host of things that happened after the Civil War when it comes to African Americans, including the whole reason that the Civil Rights Movement happened is because black people did not secure their freedoms after the Civil War, and that things turned around. People tried to change the freedoms that were supposed to
And you
happen
know how they got it?
War
They got their Second Amendment rights, and they actually got, the NRA played a big role in that. But today, Don, the
NRA.
I can't believe he actually said that the NRA played a big role in that, which is an utter lie. Again, so that's what I'm saying. He's telling us who he is. Believe him.
Did not play a big role.
Absolutely, they trained black Americans how to use firearms.
That's a lie. That's not. The NRA did not play a big role.
This is just historical fact. But
not historical fact.
The part that I
just
find,
because you say it's a
No, he says it's a historical fact. Well, tell him to cite the sources. What history? Where is he getting this from? that the NRA played a big part in African Americans securing their gun rights. You look at any type of gun situation, right? Gun situation, gun story. The NRA had never came forward to help African Americans in anything, right? In anything. When African Americans have defended themselves with guns, you never seen the NRA come and defend them. And again, it's just unbelievable. But here we go.
The part that I find insulting is when you say today black Americans don't have those rights after we have gone through civil rights revolution in this country.
You are sitting here telling an African American about the rights and what you find insulting about the way I live, the skin I live in every day.
Well, I already talked about that. I thought that was a poor argument to sit up and say that. I would have much rather have said, you know what, show me the history. Cite the person, the author, the history, cite the passages, and he certainly could not have done that. Now, this last clip was a more recent clip, and I say that for a reason. It's a more recent clip where he's speaking at Turning Point USA. Now, Turning Point USA is a white supremacist group founded and headed by Charlie Kirk, a white supremacist. Charlie Kirk has said something recently as that Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, and Ketanji Jackson, I believe, the Supreme Court Justice, basically called them ignorant. Basically said that they did not have enough intelligence to get into college themselves and to get where they are because of intelligence. And he even went on so far to say that they stole a white person's position. This is where Vivek is making his speech. But I want you to notice again. Remember, he's a chameleon, so he caters to the audience that he's speaking to. And I want you to imagine what you're getting ready to hear at the turning point. Would he say this on the Breakfast Club? Would he say this at that black barbershop on the south side of Chicago?
And now is our moment to deliver an answer to that question, what it means to be an American, that dilutes the woke agenda to irrelevance.
So again, he's speaking to an all-white crowd when he makes this statement. What does it mean to be American? He could have easily said, what does it mean to be a white American? Okay?
Let's talk about it. What does it mean to be an American? It means we believe in meritocracy, the pursuit of excellence, that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions.
Now, what is interesting about this, he is invoking Dr. King, right, which a lot of, to me, white supremacists are doing. They invoke Dr. King, the I Have a Dream speech. Yet, at the same time, remember, Dr. King made this speech in 1963 in the height of Jim Crow, in the height of the Civil Rights Movement, where, remember, rights were denied. They literally were fighting for equal rights. In the speech, even if you want to just take that segment of the speech, Dr. King was saying that his dream was that his 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, which at the time, white America not only were judging his 4 little children by the color of their skin, but they were treated as second-class citizens. They were brutalized, they were lynched, they were denied their basic American rights. And basically what Dr. King was saying is, America, white America, stop judging my 4 little kids on the color of their skin, based on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character, which even today America still judges based upon the color of the skin. Now, people like Vivek and Charlie Kirk try to flip the script, saying that black people are now the ones who judge people by the color of the skin. We don't judge black people by the color of their skin. Yes, you do. They're going to pan out later on. And you're going to see that that's an all-white audience that Vivek is catering to, pandering to. Here we go.
That is why we will end affirmative action in every sphere of American life. It is a...
Now, again, I want you to notice something when he says that we're going to end affirmative action in every sphere. Affirmative action. But let's talk about why you had to have affirmative action. Because black people were not getting hired. Black people were not being admitted to colleges. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. And notice when he says we're going to get rid of affirmative action because, again, black people are taking your jobs. But what about legacy? Are legacy admissions taking anyone's jobs?
Cancer on our national soul. It means we believe in the rule.
I want to kind of go back because I want you to hear something that he says right here. And this is Vivek saying this.
Cancer on our national soul.
Hold on, I want to go, let me go back because I want you to hear this whole thing right here.
In every sphere of American contributions. That is why we will end affirmative action in every sphere of American life. It is a cancer on our national soul.
Now, the reason why I wanted to play that again is because notice he called affirmative action a cancer, not the reason why we had affirmative action. Not the racism, not the segregation, not the discrimination. That's not the cancer. It is the cause or the cure, right? It is one of the solutions for that evil, sinful, reason why black people could not get ahead because of the laws that were passed at the time. Remember, at the very time that affirmative action was put into place, just keep this in mind that segregation and Jim Crow was active. Let's continue.
It means we believe in the rule of law, that your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. That is why we will use the U.S. military to secure our own southern border. That is what it means to defend this country.
Will you then give exceptions to those corporations that want to hire the undocumented immigrants? Will you give exceptions to those nannies and maids, construction workers, those corporations that hire undocumented factory workers, field workers?
Means we believe that the people we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government, not this bureaucracy, the deep state, the administrative state that runs the show today. And that is why I've said that we're not just going to reform these agencies. When these agencies, from the Department of Education to the FBI to the ATF to the IRS, shouldn't have never existed in the first place, we will not just reform them, we will shut them down. That is what it means to live in a constitutional republic.
Well, my question would be then, how will you have government? How will you have infrastructure? Who's going to take care of the roads, right? Who's going to take care, like you say, of all the government, as bad as it could be, but nevertheless, how are you going to, by the way, this Texas that has its own power grid, just as an example, kind of attached from all of the other infrastructure, how have they been doing with that? So my point is, how would you have these things? How would you accomplish things? How would you even have a vibrant military if you're going to say you're going to dismantle all of these things right here? He's pandering. Now, what is also interesting, now you can't see it here, but you can, I'm going to show you the, like you say, look at the crowd right there. They're going to give him a closer look. Again, all white crowd, but not only all white crowd, but those are not all rich folks like Vivek is. So the very policies that he would enact would affect these people.
That is what this campaign is all about. We are speaking the truth, the hard truth, without apology. We will do it without fear. We will speak the truth today. God is real. Unborn life is life.
Now I'm going to say this. When he says God is real to this crowd that will call themselves evangelicals, no doubt, that will call themselves Christians, what God is he talking about? Just a question. He was raised Hindu. All right, moving on.
There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity.
Really? A requirement? Fossil fuels? Is it the only? We can't grow. We can't evolve. You know, there can be better ways of powering. How about electric, right? How about electric cars? Just asking a question at this point.
Reverse racism is racism.
So again, he says that to this crowd, reverse racism. Well, who's in the power to have racism? Now, let's understand me. I certainly believe that black people can be prejudiced. But when you talk about racism, that's a different story. But what does he mean by that? And if he says reverse racism, are you going to deal with the real racism then? The racism that we've always had? Are you going to talk about the racism that started this nation, that continued this nation for 85% of its history? So what does he mean by reverse racism? Well, he's talking about things like critical race theory and wokeism, as they call, but that's not racism. That's just your characterization of it. How about the real racism? Are you going to talk about that? The real racism. You know, that racism that denied slaves their American citizenship. The racism of Jim Crow. Are you going to talk about that? Let's continue.
An open border is not a border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family is the best known form of governance to mankind.
He's hitting all the talking
Capitalism
points.
is the best system known to man to lift people up from poverty. There are 3 branches of government, not 4, and the U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We will not.
But is it really? In other words, we had to make some amendments to include some people, did we not? Like African Americans. All right.
Back down from the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what will win us the revolution of 2020.
I just want to kind of give you this screenshot here, again, of the audience in which he's speaking with, and that he's speaking their language.
That is what it means to be an American today.
All right. So, look, I wanted to kind of show you some of his mindset, his ideology, his philosophies of life. And again, some of it is very troubling. And you notice how he's able to conform himself to whatever crowd that he's speaking to. But I would say this, he hasn't changed his mindset. So even when he was in that barbershop, he didn't change, what he believes. He spoke what he believed. But what he believes is troubling. All right, guys, that's my perspective. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you ever thought a comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you next time.